Welcome to Excel Lesson 1. Excel is a tool that lets us work with data in spreadsheets. For this lesson, we'll be looking at some football statistics. Specifically, we'll be looking at the rushing yards for a team over the course of their season. We're going to learn how to use Excel to dynamically make calculations for us so that we can answer questions like, how many rushing yards did my team gain over the course of the season? What was each player's average yards per carry? What percentage did each player contribute to the team's total rushing yard gains for the season? In this lesson, we will be learning how to format cells in the spreadsheet. We will practice sorting our data. We will also learn how to write some simple formulas, and we'll spend a little extra time on understanding and calculating standard deviation. Go ahead and open your Excel file. You will see a chart that looks like this. I have my players and some information about their number of carries and their yards gained and their yards lost with rushing yards, as well as their number of touchdowns. Everything you see highlighted, we'll be using formulas to calculate. And the beauty of the formulas is that as this information changes over here, as I update it over the course of the season, Excel will automatically recalculate these numbers for me. We will start by learning some formatting skills for the cells on our spreadsheet. So on your Home tab, you have some tools that should look very familiar to you that are identical to Microsoft Word. Things like making the text bold or italic or changing the font, that sort of thing. You also will see some things that are unique to Excel that really just have to do with dealing with a spreadsheet. Notice that we have letters across the top of our spreadsheet and numbers along the left-hand side. This is providing a grid for us so that we can provide an exact location for the cells on our spreadsheet. So go ahead and click on Total Games right here. This is located in column B and row 2. So I would say that this is cell B2. Click on that box. Notice that the lines around the cell turn green when it is selected. You should already be on the Home tab, but if not, you can click right over onto Home. And then I want you to choose the arrow next to this box icon. Yours might look slightly different than what you see here, but it's going to be some sort of dotted and solid lines making 4 boxes, as you see here. So I want you to actually click on the little arrow next to that icon. When you do that, you will get a whole list of options. This is all about drawing lines around your boxes. And I want you to experiment with it a little bit to see what it does. In this case, I only have you selecting one cell, but you could have 20 cells or 1,000 cells selected and then apply this formatting to it. You can make decisions like whether you want just outside borders or interior borders, a thick bottom border, a bottom double border. There's also these drawing tools down at the bottom. I want you to experiment with that a little bit. Try also adding some more cells to your selection. So you have B2 selected, but go ahead and also select C2, and D2, and then apply some of this formatting. And to select multiple cells, if you just click on one, you can just drag your mouse across to get more. Another way to do it is to click on one cell, hold down your Shift key, okay, so I'm not clicking anymore, I'm just holding down my Shift key, and then click to where you want the end of your selection to be, like that. Now I want you to try changing your font color, and also try filling your cell with color. Those tools are right here. You've got your bucket to fill in the cell, and you have your text color tool right here. So go ahead and bedazzle your Total Games cell. Now select Total Games, cell B2, and look up here in this section. I actually have another word, played. It should say Total Games Played, but because of the width of my column, I'm not seeing that other word. It's there, but it's hidden. I can fix that by wrapping my text. So select Total Games and then choose Wrap Text. It's right here on the Home tab. This will allow that extra word to wrap to a second line. So now it should look like this. I want to wrap my text if my column needs to stay nice and narrow. But if that wasn't important, if my column could be as wide as I want, then I could just resize it. So to resize the width of the column, you just put your cursor between the letter labels at the top of the screen and tug right or left, like you see here. And if I needed to make the rows bigger, I would do the same thing just on the other side. I would drag between my numbers. Now I want you to select total games played and play with your cell alignment options. Those are right here. Notice that I can decide if it's centered or aligns to the left or the right, just like I can in Word, but I also have these options up here as to my top and bottom alignment. So play with those so that you are comfortable with how they work and what they do. Next, I still want you to have B2 selected, and I want you to choose this icon, this little AB with an upward arrow right here. Click on your arrow to pull up these options. And then I want you to experiment with these. Check out all of the things you can do with the text in that box so that you can make it exactly how you need it to be. Now I want you to go down to the bottom of your chart, the bottom of your list of football players, and select cells B17, C17, and D17. That's these three boxes down here on that totals row. Then choose Merge and Center from the Home tab. It's right here underneath where your wrap text was. And you will see that your three cells will transform into one long cell. This is how you can combine cells to make a larger cell. Go ahead and make a thick box border around the entire totals row. Just select that whole row and put a nice thick border around it so that it stands out more from our other data. Now we're going to do some sorting of our data. With sorting, I can arrange my data however I want. Any column that I have can be what I sort by. So maybe I want to sort by yards gained, and I can decide if I want the order to be largest to smallest or smallest to largest. If it's largest to smallest, then that means the individual with the most yards gained is going to be listed at the top and then go down from there. I can also add more criteria. I basically make a hierarchy of how I want it sorted. So I could say sort by yards gained, and then after you do that, sort the information by last name. So in that case, yards gained is what's paramount. But if some of the individuals have the same number for yards gained, within that subset, it's going to organize it alphabetically. So I'm going to ask you to actually sort our data alphabetically by last name. When you do this, it's very important that you pay attention to what you are selecting. You need to highlight that whole top row that has our column titles, like first name, last name, all of the names, and then also all of their data. Do not highlight that totals row down at the bottom. That's something different. I don't want that mixed in with everything else. If you were to only select the names and then sort, your data would get scrambled. So for example, Brian Stevenson played 9 games and had 109 carries, but once I alphabetize him, if I didn't select the data, if I only selected the names, he's going to jump down here somewhere and line up with someone else's data, like maybe Keith Hayden's, and all of a sudden it'll show that he played 11 games and had 2 carries. So when you're sorting, make sure you select everything that needs to stay together. And again, your totals row should not be selected. Now we want to select the sort and filter option, which is right here on the Home tab. You can also find the sort button on your Data tab. Sometimes that's a little easier just because there's so much on the Home tab, and if your screen is minimized at all, sometimes those menu options are condensed and a little bit hidden. So if you struggle to find sort and filter on your Home tab, you might find it a little more easily from your Data tab. So select sort and filter. And on your menu options, I want you to choose Custom Sort. There's this option over here, My List Has Headers. You do want to select that. The reason you want to do that is then under your column options, it will give you the names of the columns. Otherwise, it's just going to say column A, B, C, D, which can be kind of confusing. So it's much easier if you let the computer know you have header titles, and then it will show you those as options to choose from. So all you have to do is choose last name off of those options. And the order by default will be A to Z. But if you needed that to change for some reason, you could just click on these little arrows and choose a different option. So click OK. And now you should have an alphabetized list with Tim Anderson on top. And check that his data matches. He played 3 games, he had 1 carry, He gained 6 yards, lost 0. Make sure you got everything sorted accurately. Now we are going to learn how to write formulas in Excel, which is one of the things that makes this such a powerful program. With formulas, the Excel sheet can automatically make calculations for me. It can automate a lot of my processes and save me a lot of time. So on your spreadsheet, take a look at net yards. We're going to write a formula that will calculate net yards for us. And as the season progresses, I can update the information in this section. Whenever we play a new game, I can put in how many more yards Anderson gained, how many yards he lost, and then this column will automatically recalculate for me. So to calculate the net yards, we need to subtract the number of yards lost from the number of yards gained. So it's actually very simple math here. It's just yards gained minus yards lost equals net yards. My formula to tell the computer to do that is going to go right here in that first cell under net yards, H6, and the formula is equals F6 minus G6. So every formula starts with the equal sign. That's a really common mistake people make early on, is they write formulas and it's not working, and it's because they don't have an equal sign. The equal sign tells the computer, hey, guess what? Here comes a formula. Now F6 references this box here. So it's saying whatever the number is in this box, go ahead and take that, then subtract whatever is in G6 right here. So you're writing a math problem, but instead of putting the numbers, the values, you're putting in the name of the cell location. Because basically these are variables. They're going to change. And so you're telling the computer, no matter what number is in this box, take it and then subtract it from whatever number is in this box. Okay, once you've typed that in, you need to click on the green check mark up here on your formula bar. That tells the computer that you're done with your formula. And notice that your formula is written here as well. You could always type your formula here as opposed to in the cell, and also you can make edits to the formula here. Really, you can work in either place. So I told you to click the green check mark. You also, as a shortcut, have the option to press return or enter on your keyboard, and it will do the same thing. What you cannot do is click any of the cells on the spreadsheet. It's tempting to just click out of the box when you're done typing. That feels natural, but that actually messes up your formula. And I'll explain that more here in a minute, but it's very important. Type your formula, and then you must click the green check mark or hit return on your keyboard. Do not click anywhere. Now your formula will disappear and be replaced with the number 6. Since Anderson gained 6 yards and lost 0, our net value is 6. So it did that calculation for you. Some of you might see a little green triangle in the top left corner of the cell. It's kind of like that grammar check that you'll see in Microsoft Word. The computer is giving you the equivalent of a red squiggly line to say it thinks something might be wrong. However, there is not anything wrong with this formula, and having the little green triangle doesn't hurt or affect anything. But if it bothers you, to get rid of it, click on that green triangle and you'll see the little yellow triangle pop up with an exclamation point. Click into that little arrow that's next to it and just choose Ignore Error off of the drop-down menu. That will make it disappear. But again, you don't have to do anything to it. You can just ignore it. So now I want you to try changing yards lost to the number 4 instead of 0 and see how our formula recalculates for us. Now I have a 2. This is because the formula is dynamic. As the numbers change in the cells, it's going to update and do the math for us. Now change your yards lost back to 0 so that we have accurate data. Okay, so now let's consider how our formula will change for the next row. To calculate my next player, what should my formula look like in this cell? The only thing that should change is my row number. So for Anderson, I needed to reference F6 right here. For my next guy, I need to move down and look at F7, and then I need to subtract G7. So the formula is the same, it just shifts down a row. But what if I have 45,000 rows of data, or maybe 45 million? Do I have to type a new formula for each row? That seems like a tremendous amount of work. So luckily, the answer is no, you do not have to do that. Excel can automatically make this shift for you. All you have to do is select cell H6, Anderson's net yards, and copy it. The shortcut is to click Command-C on a Mac or Control-C on a PC. You will see a green dotted line appear around the cell to indicate it is being copied, okay? Now, Excel doesn't just store this forever the way that Word or PowerPoint will. If you click around and start doing something else, this cell is no longer copied, okay? And you'll notice that the dotted green line will disappear. So make sure that you see those green dotted lines. Now you want to select the rest of the column, just the yellow, not the green. That's for our totals. And notice that when you make that selection, the first cell may not turn dark like the others do, but it is selected. Pay attention to that dark outer line to see where you have selected. And then you just need to paste your copied formula. That's Command-V on a Mac or Control-V on a PC. And you'll see all of the numbers pop right in. And by the way, checking the math is always an important step. Make sure it makes sense. Don't just assume the formula you wrote does what you think it does. Take a look and make sure your results are logical. You can press Escape to deselect this copied cell up here. And remember, if you get those green triangles, you can actually just highlight that entire column, click on one of the triangles, and select Ignore Error to remove them all at once. You don't have to do them one by one. Now I want you to click on different cells in your net yards column and compare their formulas in your formula bar at the top. So that first one, remember, is equals F6 minus G6. But then if you click on the next row, row 7, it says equals F7 minus G7. Go down another row, and it switches to F8 minus G8. So when you paste a formula, Excel automatically changes your cell value by 1. So it basically just moves down a row for you automatically, which is a huge time saver. Now to lock a cell so that Excel will not change the cell value, you add a $sign on both sides of the letter. So if I had equals $F, $6 minus $G, $6, when I pasted that, it would stay the same. It wouldn't do that automatic shift to the next row. There are situations, which I'll show you, where you will need this. So $signs, lock it so that when you paste, it doesn't automatically shift to the next row. Let's move on to our next column. To calculate the average yards per carry, we need to take the net yards and divide by the number of carries. So the math for that is net yards divided by number of carries equals average per carry. Select that cell and your formula will be equals H6 divided by E6. So again, I'm just referencing the name of the cell since that value is changeable. So remember, you can enter that formula here. You could also just type it up there and then click your check mark or hit return on your keyboard to lock in your formula. So 6 divided by 0 is 6, and so that's the number that you should have once you enter the formula. Copy that formula and paste it down the rest of the column and check your numbers. Remember not to paste down here. If you do paste, you'll notice you probably will get kind of a weird error message, and you can just delete that right out of the cell. Let's make this number more precise by adding another decimal place. First, you want to click on the letter I at the top to select the entire column. You could also just highlight a section, but this is a little bit quicker. If you just click the letter name, whole column gets automatically selected. Then move the decimal place to the left. On your home screen, you will see these icons over here. Those allow you to move your decimal place. Notice that you also have some options right here to completely change the formatting to things like money or the date, time. Those are all up there. Now we will calculate average yards per game, but I have a shortcut. I'm going to ask you to do this one a little bit differently. So first type in the equal sign, and then click on your first box, which is H6 over here. Then type in your divided by sign, the slash, and then click on your second box, D6, and hit return. So basically, instead of typing in the cell names, you can just click on those boxes and it pops in for you. That's the difference here. And for me, I actually find that easier because it's just more logical for me, and I can kind of go through that process of clicking exactly where on my spreadsheet I'm referencing instead of trying to figure out, okay, well, what is this cell called? So I actually prefer that, but you can do it either way. So I'd like you to try doing it this way though for this particular formula. Then copy your formula and paste down the rest of the column, and also go ahead and add a decimal place. Now we will write a formula to find the total number of carries. You need to select the last cell in column E, and we're going to use the auto sum button. This is actually a little shortcut for us that's going to kind of introduce you to our formula builder. So if you click on the little arrow next to that auto sum button, I want you to choose sum. And just an FYI, you can also find this button on the formulas tab. It might be actually a little quicker to find from there since there is so much stuff on your home tab. So when you select auto sum and then choose sum, a formula actually pops in for you. And this is the formula to add the entire column together. It's sum, and then inside parentheses, E6 colon E16. The colon tells the computer to add all the cells that fall between that range. So anything from E6 to E16. That's your formula. You could have typed it in, but that auto sum button gives you a really nice shortcut. Check that you've got the right range. That's always an important step, especially when you are using a shortcut. And then just hit enter return, or you can click the green check mark in your formula bar. Now you have a total for the team. As always, take a look at it. You don't necessarily need to pull out your calculator and add all this up yourself, but make sure it looks logical, okay? 403 looks like it's probably the right total here. If it said something like 14,003, you would know something went awry. Now I want you to do some independent practice to make sure that you understand these concepts and can apply them. So I want you to fill in the formula for the other totals. I just mean these boxes here. So ignore I and K because these are averages. We're going to do something a little bit different there. So go ahead and you can type in the formula, or you can use that auto sum shortcut that I just showed you. But go ahead and total up yards gained, yards lost, net yards, and number of touchdowns. Here is your solution. These are the numbers you should have gotten, and these are the formulas needed to calculate that information. They're all very similar. The only difference is which range needs to be added. Now we will write a formula to find the team's overall average per carry. Go ahead and select the last cell in column I. We're going to use that auto sum shortcut again, but this time we are going to select average. So to get there, you select the arrow under auto sum from either the home or the formulas tab and just choose average. It will automatically put in the formula to average all of the numbers in that entire column. Notice how similar this is to our sum formula. I have equals, average instead of sum, and then just that cell range again in parentheses, I6 through I16. And I should get 4.7. If your number is different, it could be that you just need to move your decimal place. Time for you to practice. Can you fill in the formula to calculate the team's overall average yards? You can type in the formula or use the shortcut. Your solution is equals average K6 through K16. Now I want you to add a whole new column at the end of the spreadsheet. We're going to use this column to find the percentage of total yards that an individual rusher gained. So what I'm asking you here is to take care of the formatting of the cells to do this. So after my average yards column, I'm adding a new column all I really need to do is format that space to look like my other columns. So you want to title that new column %yards, and then just use your formatting tools to put in the lines and to color in the cells, yellow, and then green at the very bottom. So go ahead and take care of that. So to calculate each player's %yards, we need to divide each player's net yards by the team's total yards. So the first player's net gain is 6 yards, so to find his contribution to the team, you would take 6 divided by 1,830 equals H6 divided by H17. So you can build that formula by just clicking on the appropriate boxes, or you can just type it into the cell. You will get a 0. Change your units to percentage, and now you will have 0%. Then move the decimal place a couple times so that you get 0.33%. So Anderson's contribution to the team was very small. He was 0.33% of the total net yards for the team. Copy that formula and paste it down the rest of your column. It will look like this. Why didn't it work? Why can't I just paste this formula like I've been doing with my other formulas? Look at your formula in L7, that first box that got the formula pasted in. It says equals H7 divided by H18. Okay, so that's this box divided by this box. There's no number there, right? It did its thing where it shifted everything by one row, and now I've shifted away from where I actually need to be. So as it pasted, let's look at the next one, everything moved down one. So I went to this cell, and then down here, this one also shifted to another blank cell. That's why I have a problem. We need to divide by H17 every time. When we paste it, it's changing the cell's value, right? We don't want this one to change. So that brings us to cell reference. Relative cell reference is when you paste the formula into a cell and the formula automatically adjusts the cell reference to the new row. Okay, that's what we had been doing. But in this case, we need to use absolute cell reference. That makes the value absolute so it will not change when we paste it. We use the $sign to tell Excel to make the reference absolute so that we can keep cell H17 when we paste. So we want to place the $sign before and after the H, right here. It might be easier to do this from your formula bar over here, or you can try and edit, in the cell itself. We want to leave H6 alone. We want to keep that relative because we do want that to cycle through to H7, H8, H9. Those numbers are changing, but we are always dividing by the team total, which is this number, H17. So we've got to keep that locked with our $signs. So once you've made that adjustment, copy this new version of the formula and paste it, and you should no longer have any trouble. Don't forget to leave that total cell blank though. And you may need to make some adjustments like putting on the percentage formatting and moving decimal places. So now we can see how much of a contribution each player made. So I can say, hey, this guy brought in almost 33% of the net yards for the team. This guy only brought in 3%. That's the point of this data. For our total, let's just select that last cell and use the sum formula to find the total percentage. So if all of my math is correct, then my total here should be 100%. This isn't really a necessary data point, but I wanted you to go ahead and calculate that to kind of see how it all comes together. If your numbers are off from mine, it could be that you still need to change the format to percentage. Remember, you can just click that option up on the Home tab. Now we're going to talk about standard deviation. This is a calculation that tells us how far measurements in a group are spread out from the group's average, or the mean. It's basically answering the question, how much do the numbers deviate from one another? So imagine you have two students with the exact same class average of 80%, okay? They've earned the same grade, but the grades they made to get that average could be very different. Let's imagine that this girl on the left is very consistent, an 80, an 81, 79, 82, all really close, right? But we could also have this girl over here on the right who made an 87, a 76, a 57, and a 98. She is not nearly as consistent, but in the end, she has the same average. When we have a low standard deviation, that means that the numbers are all very close to the average, just like this girl. A high standard deviation means that the numbers are very spread out. So let's calculate the standard deviation for our averages. How much deviance do we have for each group? First, select the empty cell I-18 under average per carry. Select AutoSum and choose More Functions. This is your formula builder. Our standard deviation formula is STDEV. You might actually need to search for it up here on the top. I would think it would also pop up if you typed in standard deviation. But I do know what you're looking for is going to be STDEV. Notice that you get a description here on the bottom. It explains what the formula does. This could be helpful. There's even a more help button. You can do very advanced math calculations using your formula builder. You can do very advanced statistical analysis. You can do calculus. Really anything you can imagine you probably can do in Excel. So go ahead and choose STDEV and then click on Insert Function. That formula is going to pop in for you. It looks really similar to these other formulas that we've used, right? Equals STDEV, so it's telling us the math operation and then our range. Now this time, my range is not exactly what I want it to be though. It automatically gave me a range for this full column, I6 through I17, but I17, this green part, that's actually not a number I want included because I don't want our overall team average included. That's going to skew my data a little bit. So I need to change this last part of the formula to I16 so that I'm only getting the numbers that are in yellow, not that number in green. And you actually have three options for where you can click to make this adjustment. You can change it in your formula builder. You can type directly in the cell on the sheet. Or in that little formula builder screen, you actually have the option to make edits and changes to your formula right there. So go ahead and make that adjustment. Your standard deviation should be 2.2. If your number's different, you might want to double check that you have the right number of decimal points. So this means that on average, your numbers deviate from the mean by 2.2. Now I want you to do some independent practice. Go ahead and calculate the standard deviation for your average yards. So you could have written that formula or used the formula builder. Here under AutoSum, you just click on More Functions. And then you need to choose standard deviation and Insert Function. And then we don't want our overall average included, so we had to change the last part of the formula to K16. So comparatively, our average per carry had a kind of a low standard deviation. The average carries per player really did not vary that much from one another. But for average yards, there was huge variance between one another because, for example, look, this guy got 63, this guy got 0.1. So much more deviation in these numbers. Now I want you to go to your Formulas tab and click on Show Formulas. This is really useful to be able to see all of your formulas in the cells. And you can just click this button on and off to toggle what you're viewing. But I want you to just take a moment to kind of see all of the formulas that you wrote and make sure you understand them. Take a minute to make sure you can read these formulas. You understand what they say and what they're doing. Time for some practice. I want you to sort the players so that they are listed by their net yards, with the most yards listed at the top. So we are ditching alphabetical order and reorganizing everyone. Remember not to highlight that totals row. We don't want to scramble that up with everything else. So to do that, remember that you can find that Sort and Filter tab from either the Home tab or your Data tab. And then you just want to make sure that you've selected that your list has headers, choose net yards, and make sure the order is largest to smallest. Here's what that final Excel sheet should look like. I have some more practice for you. We are actually going to move on to a different tab on your Excel file. If you look at the very bottom, you have been on the Student Copy tab. Go ahead and click on the Practice tab to the right of that, and you'll see that you will toggle to a different sheet. On the sheet, you have some demographic data for a school, and your directions are actually below, letting you know what kind of formula I want you to put in each cell. This is very simple math. I realize that you could easily do these calculations and just throw numbers into these cells. However, that is not the point of this lesson. I'm using simple numbers so that you can check your work and see very clearly and quickly if your formulas are accurate. So the goal here is to write a formula for each cell that will calculate dynamically. That means if I get more students mid-year and I add them to my totals, all of the other numbers will immediately update for me. You also need to make sure that you are writing formulas that can be pasted. There's definitely going to be a situation where you need to use that $sign to lock a particular cell. I realize there's not that many blanks, and you may feel like it's simpler just to write a different formula for each cell, but that is not practical because in the real world, you may have thousands of rows of data. So you need to make sure you can write formulas that can easily be pasted. So looking at your data, you have the number of girls and the number of boys for each grade level. First, you need to calculate what each grade's total population is, so just girls plus boys for 6th grade, girls plus boys for 7th grade, etc. Then you need to calculate what percentage of each grade are boys. So I would take the number of boys divided by the total population for that grade. Next, what percentage of each grade are girls? Very similar, except this time I would take the number of girls and divide them by the total for the grade. Next, what percentage of the total school population is each grade? So for example, what percentage of the entire school population is my 10th grade class? In order to complete that calculation, I will tell you that this one will have to be completed over here, which is the total number of kids for the school. You're going to be dividing each grade level's total population by the total number of kids for the entire school. This is where you are definitely going to need to use that $sign to lock one of your cells in place because you will be dividing every time by this number. You won't want it to shift down to a new row. I also want you to calculate the average number of girls per grade and the average number of boys per grade. And then for each of those averages, also calculate the standard deviation. Remember when you do those calculations that your range just needs to be the original data set. You're not going to want to include this row in your range of numbers. So pause the video, take your time with this. If you struggle, you need to review the lesson. You need to look back and try and figure it out. Do not just move forward and look immediately at the answers, because if you're struggling here, then there are bigger gaps that need to be addressed. So if this is difficult, review the lesson, try again, and then when you think you have it right, go ahead and move forward to see the solution. So here I have all of your formulas listed and also the numbers that you should have come up with down below. The totals column was the simplest, very simple addition, girls plus boys. This was easy to paste because you needed both cells to move down a row each time. For percentage of boys, we just needed to take the C column and divide it by the D column. Girls is very similar, B column divided by D. And then for the percent of the total population, we wanted that first number to rotate through the D column because we're moving through our different grade levels, but we had to divide by the same cell, D9, every time. So you needed that $sign in front of and behind the D to lock it in place so that Excel would know when you pasted to always return to that cell, not to shift to the next row. So that cell D9, all you needed was a simple sum formula. The formula for determining the average is very similar to the sum formula here and here. And then your standard deviation has the same structure. Only thing you needed to tweak there was the range. So if you use the formula builder, it would want to automatically give you all the way through row 9. But that's not our original data set. This would actually skew our number. So we had to make sure to make that adjustment so that it stopped at row 8, B8 and C8 here. On your assessment, you will get a new spreadsheet with more football data, and you will be asked to format cells, sort data, and write formulas. There won't be any surprises or anything out of left field. It should feel very similar to what we did here, but the data will be completely different and you'll be asked to make some different sorts of calculations. The very best way you can prepare for this test is to re-download a clean Excel sheet and you started with at the beginning of the lesson and see if you can write out those formulas and fill in everything that we did together on your own without me giving you step-by-step directions. Practice that until you can do it without having to look anything up, and you will be in great shape for the test.